Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And we're happy for another reason because Anne-Marie's back. We missed you last week, Anne-Marie. Thanks for rejoining us here on the show.
Yeah, I had some lovely family time up in the Forest of Dean, which is a beautiful part of the UK.
Oh,
if you ever get to visit.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Well, I'm glad you got that time with your family, and that's a beautiful place to spend it. But
Yes,
we're glad to have you
lovely.
back. Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And we're joined today by Constance Curtis, who has an interesting resume. She's basically all about how to overcome and break limiting beliefs, which is something we love around here. We talk about it quite frequently. So I'm looking forward to getting some more information about that. But we also need to learn a little bit more about her. So first and foremost, Constance, welcome to the program. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you both.
We're glad to have you, and we need to know a little bit more about you. So give us like the 2-minute potted biography, and don't leave out any of the mucky parts because they're the fun parts.
Oh goodness, I was born and raised in a small town, Yuma, Arizona. Went to school in Arizona, then moved moved out to California. Now I'm in Texas, and just along that entire journey, I've been an entrepreneur for 25 plus years. I'm aging myself now. I absolutely love it. I've always loved creating and building. But I used to build from a place of should and have to until I got really quiet with myself and asked myself, what is it that I actually want to build? What is it that actually makes me happy? And that's kind of where everything transformed about a few years ago. And, what led me to where I am now as a transformational coach.
That's actually the most important question, isn't it? And it's the one that we stumble on, often without realizing that we're stumbling on it. Yeah. And we ask us, and we'll say, "Oh yeah, I know what I want," and then we just kind of think about it for a minute, or maybe 5 or 10 or 20, and then we come up with some kind of an answer. And it's sort of something we like, but we're not really saying to ourselves, "You know what? I don't really know what it is that I want."
Exactly.
So you asked yourself that question, but then you also got honest about it. Talk about the process you went through to come to your conclusion about what it is you really wanted.
Yeah. So at the time, I was a founder of a software company. So when we first launched, we were B2C. We were an application. And we decided along the way, after raising some capital and my incredible team of mentors that I had, we decided that we should pivot to software. And as we started to pivot and bring on more engineers, it became, more challenges definitely arrived, but we had to raise more money. And I was just on this constant hamster wheel of trying to raise that money and trying to keep, the team motivated and everything, built, until finally, to be honest, the company just we were a startup and we just ran out of money. So I had it was a huge bummer. But I had to get quiet with myself and say, okay, what is the next step? And as much as I truly loved, and I honestly still even believe in that idea, I'm not completely sure if the tech industry was really my route. I think very quickly I would have had to bring on like a different CEO to take it to the next level, because I love building from a place of ease. And the tech industry is definitely more a little bit of that hustle mode. So, as I experienced, all of that and meeting with VCs, and, became very clear that, okay, I'm either going to have to bring on another CEO, or this just might, not be my path, and that's okay. So it was kind of a bit of an ego death, because it was for so long, for 5 years, it was really part of, I felt like my identity, and I had attached myself so much to it that it was like, who am I without, that everyone knows that I'm building this. So who the heck am I really? And that's when my sister introduced me to a manifestation program that really had you tap into your authenticity. And that's kind of where I started that journey of rediscovering myself.
That's really important too, for a number of different reasons, not the least of which is that when you're in the software industry, most people don't know this. People think of that software as you start a software business and you make millions of dollars, and that's just the way it works. When the fact of the matter is, most software ventures fail, and that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, but it's the reality. And of course, every time that one does fail, it goes through all the pains and trials and tribulations like you were describing, and it is painful. It's a really difficult thing to go through. I have an IT background, so I know something about that. Anne Marie works in IT, so she has some familiarity too. We know what you're talking, but the listeners may not realize. I mean, that there's no guaranteed gold mine when you're in software, and add in the fact that it really wasn't a passion. That's a double whammy right there.
Yeah, and it was a passion. The idea was a passion, but it was more of leading, recruiting the engineers and that kind of stuff. I was like more of like, I just wanted to sit back and be the visionary and then really let someone else come in and be the day-to-day, because the managing of the engineers, that type of stuff was a little bit more, I felt like out of my wheelhouse, and someone else could have been better at that. But
I totally get that side, because it's exactly how I feel about it, to be perfectly honest. And I'm in the middle of doing a software project, so I totally get it. But in fact, I even swore I would never go back to software. I used to do very low-level web development. I stopped that a number of years ago. I said, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And then, damn it, AI comes along. Now all of a sudden I'm hooked again. But
I remember saying that as well.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's sort of like an ongoing challenge, dealing with not only the shifts and changes that go on in your own career, but also how you're going to react to them and respond to them. And that's really the root of it, isn't it? I mean, right now you are in a place where you help top level people to overcome their limiting beliefs and so forth. But that's where it starts.
Right. Absolutely. That is where it starts. And I had so many limiting beliefs and self-doubt, and our mind, we're human, right? So our mind loves to take over and tell us stories. And I think that's completely normal. I think if anyone says they don't have any, self-doubt or limiting beliefs, that probably is their own limiting belief.
No kidding. Yeah. The first of many, I would imagine.
So yeah, during kind of when I was thinking, what is my next move? And I was getting into consulting actually, but on the side, like on my own personal growth journey, I was doing for years all of the work to really step into my next level. And as I was consulting other business, owners and entrepreneurs, I was seeing all of the limiting beliefs and self-doubt that I had worked so hard to overcome. And I thought, should I tap in and give them, this advice? Because coaching and consulting are completely different, and so I was strategy and we were business, and I was like, I'm not really sure it's my place to go into the deeper, emotional vulnerability side of what we're doing. So I reached out to my coach and I said, I'm feeling really called to do this work with others and incorporate the consulting and the coaching, in under one umbrella. And she was like, I love it. And then, so that journey started about a year ago.
And how interesting that you started off by thinking that the two really weren't, compatible, and then you combine them anyway.
I combined them. Yep, exactly.
What happened here?
And some clients I'll do just consulting, and some I'll do just coaching, and some I work both. So it's really great. Because some business owners and entrepreneurs that I work with, they really just need the personal development side. They're basing all of their worth on those achievements, and so we're going in and really like rewiring and understanding that happiness, everything we need is internal, right? It's already inside of us, and finding that happiness and that joy now is going to, suit them better than waiting till they climb to the top of the mountain to try to find that happiness.
Isn't that really a consistent storyline, though, how people build their self-esteem based on what they're doing, and then they're confused when it doesn't actually work. And that's the polite way to put it, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with like societal programming, right? And even like being, growing up, a lot of high achievers, probably in school, they got straight A's, they won the spelling bees, they were always, top in their class. And so that really from a very, very young age, they started to associate their worth with those achievements. So it starts by the time we're 14, we're pretty much all programmed, and just about unprogramming ourselves from there.
I would say more like 5, 6, or 7, but I'm with you. I get it.
Yeah. Definitely by 7 is like kind of what they say, but up to 14.
Okay. Yeah. Well, sure, because there's an ongoing trend that goes on there. So yeah, I can buy into that. I was having a conversation with a friend recently, and in the conversation we were talking about how people who are high achievers, though, the high IQ, the Mensa types and so forth, very frequently, much more frequently than the broader population, have mental illness issues, various kinds of issues that kind of get in the way in ways that they certainly didn't anticipate, the society, the culture didn't anticipate. And it can wreak havoc because they are bright, but they're also bright in terms of self-destructing, helping other people to self-destruct. I mean, it can work. It's one of those things that can work both ways. It just depends which way you use the tool, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be certainly true with that broader population. I'm kind of curious to know, as you work with people who have those high expectations, who have, like you said, they were the straight A students, they were the top of the class, all that kind of thing. And then they run into their mortality, or they run into their limitations, or they run into, they never had to deal with something really challenging before. How do you help them get through that part? Because that to me is probably the hardest thing they have to deal with, dealing with having limitations when they didn't have limitations before.
I think they realize if they get quiet with themselves that they've always had, the limitations usually around their self-worth. And so, but it just takes the awareness, right? It takes getting quiet enough to see, where am I, what external validations or external factors am I basing my worth off of? And with high achievers, it's actually easier to, I believe, to recognize and have awareness around than others. I feel like they can tune in and be pretty aware, really, just because they want to do the work. They want to succeed in doing the inner work. They've achieved so much success professionally, and now they're like, okay, I'm ready to make sure that my level of happiness personally reaches the same level of success.
So in other words, the thing that drove them to the top is also the thing that drives them to, okay, I'm about to get better here, we're going to do this right now.
And they're ready to go. It's pretty incredible to see.
And surely when that happens, do they end up achieving even more and going higher up their careers, or because they're doing both the work, they're high achieving in work and they're high achieving in themselves?
They continue to achieve, but they no longer base their achievements on their worth. Or they realize that fancy sports car that they bought, or that $1 million home, they're not necessarily like saying, okay, my worth is attached to this external thing that I received, that I bought myself. So they are continuing to achieve, but if that all went away, they're realizing, I'm worthy, I am beyond worthy, just as I am. So when we're, when we go to pass, which eventually, one day we all will, I always say, we don't take, when it comes to health, we are mind, body, and spirit, right? We talk a lot about, mind, mental health, and a lot about obviously our physical health, but the health of our soul, the health of our spirit is incredibly important too. And when we pass and we leave, we take our soul, right? We don't take our brain. We don't take our body. So they realize that when they do leave, they are going to leave fulfilled. They're going to leave fulfilled, leaving everything, all of their, external achievements behind. They're still going to feel fulfilled in their soul, which is like a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, I can see that. As certainly as Anne Marie knows, you may not know, I do 3 episodes of this a week. My co-host, I do 2 shows on Monday. The second one is with a co-host named Joel Elston, who was my 12th interview back in 2012. So we've been friends for a long time. And he is a life coach, former therapist who turned life coach. He has a lot of very well-to-do clients, many billionaire clients. And there's a common theme that runs through it. I'm kind of curious to know if you encountered the same theme. The common theme that he encounters is that these people, they are extraordinarily good at creating wealth. In some cases, it kind of surprised them. They didn't really expect it was going to work out the way it did. In other cases, they're more driven and it was actually part of the plan. But the one common theme among all of them, not all of them, among many of them, is that they have terrible human relationships, particularly in their families. What my favorite story that I loved hearing from him was about the client who had, I think, 3 or 4 kids, and he had gifted to each of his kids properties that were of equal value, roughly, I don't know, $750,000 each for each property or something like that. Or not $750,000. It was like $6 to $7 million per property. And there was one kid whose property came in at $200,000 less than the others because he had already helped that person to the tune of $200,000. And that kid was fighting tooth or nail. Oh no, mine should be the same amount as my siblings. And the client basically said, Joel, I don't care what you do with me. Just take these kids off my hands. I can't handle it anymore. So that's like the more extreme version of the problem. But relationships are often a real problem. I'm curious to know if you run into the same thing with your clients.
Yeah. So I don't work specifically with any billionaires, although I would love to, one day. But I have heard that a lot of billionaires have not only tough relationships, family relationships, but can also maybe not the best health too, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they're really focused on their business and not so much like the health of their bodies, which is interesting. But as far as the clients that I work with, well, first of all, I just think that whether you're a high achiever or, and when I say high achiever, I mean like maybe you've built like a really successful company personally. That doesn't mean you're not a high achiever like across other, parts of your life. So I probably shouldn't say it like that. But no matter where you are in what you're building, I think actually building relationships and authentic, genuine relationships is hard nowadays for everyone because of social media in the culture that we've been brought up in as far as like that hustle culture, right? So those billionaires, those business owners that are making hundreds of millions of dollars, a lot of their time is going to those businesses. It's hard to. What did that balance? What does it look like? People always say, work-life balance. And a lot of, those business owners don't necessarily have that. I do think there's a paradigm shift changing right now. I do think we're going into an era of people want to build success and whatever that means to them, but with ease. With making time for their family and friends, making sure that, they have time for the stuff that lights up their soul. And part of that is the connections with the people that's in their life. So I'm hopeful, for mankind and that we can shift that behavior. But yeah, it's a bummer to see that with anyone, right? When you have those types of, relationships in your life. Because I don't know about you guys, but personally, I'm very, very close with my family. So I couldn't even imagine that type of behavior. Anyone acting like that, like my nieces and nephews to, if I gave my niece something and gave another one, like them fighting over that seems so silly.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet it is amazing how often it continues. I'm glad to hear, though, that you're saying that you're seeing the trend in the positive direction. That's good reinforcement.
Thank goodness.
I'm also curious to know about how you approach with your clients the general topic of achieving that balance, because it sounds like, I'm kind of inferring from what you're saying, it sounds like the clients already want that to some degree.
Yep.
But they're having trouble. They're struggling in one or more areas. So when you're talking to the client, along the lines of whatever their particular area of struggle is. How do you approach that with them?
So the first thing we talk about is their purpose. Like what do they feel their purpose here on earth is? And what I used to think my purpose is what I was here to do, but it's actually our purpose is, who we are. It's rediscovering ourselves. It's what are the things that light us up, that like truly make us happy and bring us joy. And so we get really quiet on building out what that list looks like in both personal and professional life. And then from there, once we find out what are the things that truly fulfill them on a soul level, then we can create and design and build, their dream personal and professional life around that. So that's where it begins.
It begins there. Okay. So it's starting the conversation from an internal perspective rather than an external perspective, which certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
And I imagine that also it lends itself and dovetails very nicely with how you address the various limiting beliefs that come up, because like you said, you're a limiting belief coach. That's your thing. You want to help people overcome that as much as you possibly can. I'm also thinking that as you're exploring these conversational points with clients or with potential clients, you're encountering people who find that their limiting beliefs actually impinge upon what it is they're trying to do. What it is that they want to make that change. They want to have the balance, but the limiting belief stops them from doing that. Talk about that piece of it a little bit.
Yeah. So after we identify like the things that make them happy, that light up their soul, we go internal to figure out what that deeper desire is. And usually it's freedom or safety or security. That's actually, what they're needing. And then if you look at the limiting belief, so let's say that their ultimate, desire in life is to have freedom, to have ultimate freedom. But they're overcoming a belief of maybe they're wanting to take their company to the next level. Maybe it is really high achieving, but they want to take it to the next level. And what does that mean to them? Well, they're thinking the next level, we're going to have to raise more money, scale the team. This is going to require a lot more, of my time, which their subconscious mind is going, okay, wait, this is the opposite of freedom. We want to scale and it's going to take up more of our time. So their deeper desire is ultimate freedom. What they're wanting is to scale their company, which is going to take up their time. So, which is essentially to them taking away more of their freedom when they're trying to get that back. So we have what we call competing desires. So we have to overcome those, what we do is we don't judge it. We don't judge the limiting belief. We understand that it's just there trying to protect you. Like it's just there saying, okay, you want freedom, but yet you're adding more to your plate. This doesn't sound like freedom. Right. But the ultimate goal might be to sell the company, which then that person will have that ultimate freedom, right? So they accept the limiting belief. They say, I see you. I see that you're just trying to protect me and to protect my freedom. But we're actually, once we get to this next level, we'll be able to, sell off the company. And then we'll be able to, have that ultimate freedom that we once want. So typically the limiting belief lives so deep in the subconscious that we're unaware of it. So for me, it's really just about discovering, well, what is that is, how is it trying to serve you? And I think that's what a lot of people miss is that our limiting beliefs and our blocks, they're our friends. They're just like a part of us going, hold on, I'm not totally sure I want to, sign up for this. And it's just like a friend there, trying to protect you. But once you can see that, it's a lot easier to work with that limiting belief to step into your next level.
And while you were talking about perhaps what happens after they sell the company or whatever, which is certainly part of the conversation, I'm also thinking about what happens while they're running the company, because as you pointed out, they feel the need to keep building it out and that they're going to be putting more of their time and effort into it. And whenever I hear that in the back of my mind, I think to myself, delegation skills. And there are two really important aspects to delegation skills. First of all, being willing to do it, which is more than many people are willing to handle. And then the even more difficult piece knowing how to do it well so that you're actually handing the tasks and responsibilities off to people who can really do the job and do it well without taking up all your time to do it. That's where the real skill is.
I love that.
Right? I mean, so
yeah, absolutely.
That I think that actually has to probably come before they can even look at what happens after they sell the company.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that just, we'll go, once we unpack the limiting belief, we'll go through all of the steps of why it's not true, right? So we'll say, can you, one of the questions is, can you say without a shadow of doubt that this limiting belief is true? And then they say no. And then they list all of the reasons, because I can hire, a team to delegate, because I can. And then they list all of those out and they say, okay, here's the entire list of why this limiting belief is not true. And then that also becomes the aligned action step plan. So now that we've identified it's not true and what can be done, then it's easier. So then it's awareness, acceptance, aligned action. Those are the 3 stages.
So key takeaway, when you're trying to figure out how to hire the right people, the real thing you're trying to figure out is what your own limiting beliefs are regarding hiring the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people even have limiting beliefs around hiring because maybe they've hired so many people that have just failed, and they feel like training is, more work than so there's a lot that can go into it. It really depends. It's situation by situation.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, that's part of the fun of what you do, right? You get to experience one situation after another, and they're all completely different from the last one.
Yeah. And what's really fun, actually, today on one of my calls earlier with the client, he could not see this limiting belief. And so what's one of my favorite things, I can pretty quickly usually identify limiting beliefs. And so, but I sit there until I like to see them come to the realization, right? And it's really powerful when you have that aha moment. But sometimes we just don't see it. There are these blind spots, right? And so he's sitting there going, I cannot figure this out. And it took us 45 minutes, but he got there. And when he did, he was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is what's blocking me. And so it's exciting to see them have these moments and then be ready to all right, let's do it. Let's work through it and move. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, and it doesn't matter how high or low successful a person you are. Everybody encounters that because the simple fact of the matter is it's so much easier to see it in somebody else. That's one of the reasons that coaching is so much fun, because it's so much easier to see it in somebody else. Now, having to see it in yourself, not quite so much the same deal.
Exactly.
Because, like you said, we have these blind spots. And I'm not even sure we can call them blind spots. They're like massive walls in many cases where the entire wall is a blind spot.
100%. That's why I have my own coach. Because
sure.
we all have limiting beliefs. I'm like, oh, I have my own coach that helps me work through every single week, like the stuff that I have coming up. So it's important, because you're right. It's very hard for us to see our own.
Yeah. And even when it's pointed out to us what they are, then we have to actually come to terms with that really is it. Oh, you mean I have to get honest about this? No, wait a minute. I didn't sign up for that, did I?
I can imagine that's so empowering, though, because you lose yourself when you're focused on something else, and then just to rediscover yourself and go, oh, that's where I've been holding up previously. And then I would imagine that's so empowering to go, oh, change that.
I found that a lot of up and coming entrepreneurs, or people that want to become entrepreneurs but haven't able to hit their next level, they actually have and I had this, and then when I discovered this, I said, there's no way I have this. I had a fear of success.
Really?
I was like, who has a fear of success? I couldn't even believe that. When I was working with my coach, and that came up. And it's the same thing that came from, my deeper desire is ultimate freedom. And the more that I scale the company, right, the busier that I get, but that was not true. And so, but it's a fear of becoming more and more successful that a lot of, people that get stuck and not able to really excel in their careers, it's because they have that fear of success.
Yeah. And not so much because they fear the success, but because they fear that there are going to be things going along with the success that they don't want.
Exactly. It's not the success itself. It's the obligations, the time commitments, the all of the stuff that, you know, comes with scaling the company.
Mm.
What do you think the connection is to the people who are involved in your success, in your business success? Because we're talking primarily about people who run their own businesses or who are directly involved in the running of businesses. And there's a special piece of that, the fact that they get to know the hirees. They hired them. They get to know how they work. They get to know how they think, and they get to deal with all the mucky pieces of dealing with humans who are, you know, making mistakes and not doing things exactly the way you had in mind. And all of a sudden you're kind of in a different ballpark. And I mean, there's a lot to deal with there in terms of those connections. Talk about those for a bit.
Yeah. Wait. So sorry. Can repeat that one more time? Just the connections that the business owners have with their employees.
With their employees, yeah, the people who are closest to them in the venture.
And what's your direct question around that?
That's because you're dealing with a lot of different humans, and when you're dealing with humans have different ways of thinking about things from you. They aren't all in lockstep with you, so you're having to deal with the fact that everybody is approaching things a little bit differently. They're thinking about it a little bit differently, and you're not reacting nicely to it, and it just gets messier and messier.
I see what you're saying. So I always tell my clients with their employees, to do the same type of work around understanding their deeper desires of what it is that truly lights them up and fulfills them, and go from and build momentum and motivation from that part, right? If they know that their employees, it's like, okay, well, I need a job. Well, why do you need a job? I need money. Well, why do you need money? Because I love experiences and I want to travel the world. If they know their deeper desire of their employees is experiences, is whatever it is that truly lights them up, they can build from that place and motivate from that place. That is what's going to, to drive that employee to do better. And we know what are the things that they need. Is it praise? Do they even like praise? Do they have a fear of being seen? Because if they have a fear of being seen, maybe they don't like praise, right? So sure. I've always, that's funny you asked that, because since I just work with, my clients, I don't know their employees as much. We actually don't touch on that as much because it's really just, majority of my clients I work with on the personal side. Mm-hmm. But I have thought about, for a couple of them, we've talked about me going in and doing some work with their employees as well, which I think would be really cool.
Yeah, I can understand that. Mm-hmm. And the other piece that I was thinking of in regarding to the same general concept, you touched on the motivational piece, but there's also the fact that people are different. I mean, thank goodness, that's one of the things that makes life so interesting. But because we're different, we think differently, even if we're all pretty much on the same wavelength and pretty much on the same topic and the same plan and same approach and so forth. We think differently, we act differently, we approach things differently. It's one of the main factors, I believe, that leads some leaders to be micromanagers, because I want you to do it my way, not your way. My way it's my way or the highway. And of course, it creates all kinds of problems when they do that. And then they have to deal with those problems. And now all of a sudden they're even further away from their goal of the freedom that they were looking for. So it's one of those dynamics that it can wreak havoc in any kind of business relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have a different energy. So, there's some of us that can do one task for a really long time, like running a marathon, and then there's some of us that for me, I'm great. I can do many, many tasks for like a very long time. So I'm I compare it to like a CrossFitter, right? Like a marathon runner is just like, I'm going to run 24 miles. CrossFitter, we're kind of all over the place, like doing different workouts, but we have the energy, to keep going. Yeah. Some people can work in sprints. They work in a sprint and they need like to rest. So knowing that too, the energy that your employees bring behind their work is really powerful.
Yeah. And getting to know who they are too. One of the best pieces of advice I was given many years ago was, especially if you're running anything more than a few people where you're managing, a medium to, well, even a small, medium, large size team that you're running, you want to actually not just get to know them. You want to get to know them regularly. You want to have regular contact with them, and not just on a business level, but on a personal level, on every level, because the more that you do that, first of all, the more they're going to open up to you, and they're going to be willing to tell you about stuff that isn't working properly, rather than sitting back and saying, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to get in trouble if I say something, so I'm not going to say anything. All those little nuances that come out of having that kind of, not necessarily deep, but certainly very direct and strong personal relationship with the people who are on your team, it pays huge dividends. For some reason, that even all these years later, it still doesn't get taught much in MBA classes. I'm not quite sure why, but it's like the core of the whole thing. And Emery, you know what that's like. I mean, you're working in the IT field, but you're not really an IT person. You're working with a bunch of IT people, so you're kind of having to do that on a regular basis, right?
I feel like an alien. I feel like an alien in a different world. It's, you do have to understand what people are passionate about, and just find out a bit about them as people rather than just the role, just so you can then find a way in to understand them and to work closer together.
And that becomes your main tool for how do you not only keep them on track, but also help them to accomplish what it is they're trying to accomplish, because now you have an inroad. Without that, what do you do?
Exactly. And they don't know the angle that I need it from, because it's not their field.
Right.
And it's just brings that working relationship closer together.
Yeah. So that's the real challenge is the developing the relationships. I mean, we always think about relationships in terms of, relationship with a primary other or with your kids or something like that. But as one of my co-hosts from the past once reminded me, we have relationships with everything. We have relationships with our computer. We have relationships with our coffee cup. We have relationships with literally everything in our life. And if we don't pay any attention to those relationships, they're going to come back and bite us. I mean, that's just the nature of relationships. So which way are you going to handle it? Are you going to actually build the relationships, or are you going to let them just do their own thing and go away?
Well, when you go out for dinner, if the nicer you are to the waitress, there's better service you're going to get.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah. That's the microcosm of it. So. Okay, so we've gotten an idea, Constance, of how you approach your overall thing with your clientele. I'm also curious to know a little bit more about the story of how you developed the whole thing, because once you kind of set in motion the idea that you wanted to start helping other people rather than running a software company, you had to take certain steps. Talk about those steps. Talk about what those earliest steps were like.
Yeah, so it just started honestly with the work that I was doing on myself, not realizing that, years later, I would actually turn it into a business, like all of the, personal growth work that I've done personally. So that's where it started, was doing my own growth journey. And then from there, just falling in love with it and just just being like, I can't believe not everyone is meditating. Or I can't believe that not everyone has read Untethered Soul, or, there's just so many things that I wanted to share. Not only just share, but really help people. Like I've never felt more fulfilled in my life. Every single day when I get off, my Zoom calls, because my coaching is virtual. When I get off of my Zooms at the end of the day, I just am smiling, right? Because I truly see my clients transform, and it's such a beautiful thing. We start out and they're like, they're not happy, and then 2, 4, 6 months later, they're just, grinning ear to ear and just really feeling like beyond worthy. So it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, it all really started with my own personal growth journey, falling in love with it myself, and then taking something that I have never been more passionate about and telling everyone, you have to do this inner work. Like, if you're not doing the inner work to grow, you're missing out.
Yeah, I think we all get that. But I want to zero in a little bit. You've identified a number of different factors that were involved in, how your evolution kind of led into this. Can you pick one that stood out more than all the others? One thing that you were learning about yourself or studying about yourself or working on, and that was the one that translated. Maybe it's one that translated and you didn't even expect it was going to translate.
I think it was understanding. So our thoughts create our emotions, which create our behaviors, right? So it was so interesting to me when I started really separating myself from my thoughts. Like, I don't know if you've read The Untethered Soul, but it is like such an eye-opener book. And I was like, oh my goodness. And in that book, he talks about, imagine if your mind, all of the thoughts, like all of the things that you tell yourself throughout the entire day, imagine if that was a human sitting next to you, just talking to you all day long. You would be like, you have got to like be quiet for like 1 minute. Like, I need a moment. And I was dying laughing reading this book, going, oh my God, isn't like that the truth? Like the stuff we tell ourselves, like that was a friend. I would fire that friend. I would be like, you are not like, I want nothing to do with you anymore. Yet we tell ourselves this all the time and we keep, talking. So that was a huge moment for me. And now my awareness around my thoughts, like now I can laugh at my thoughts. And then another part was the emotions, the sensations within the body. And there was this, I can't remember who it was, but this guy interviewed, I think it was an athlete and then someone that was getting ready to go, talk on stage in front of like thousands of people. And they both had this sensation within their body. And, the guy said, are you nervous, the athlete? And he said, no, I'm excited. Like that was an excitement for him. And the one going out on the stage was like freaked out. And it's like, I have so much anxiety, but it was the same sensation, but it was what we were telling ourselves. Right. So once I learned that I can self-regulate. So I remember before I learned how to self-regulate, I could go a whole day. Like if something set me off, it might like affect my mood for the entire day. Or I might, if I read an email that, gave me a little bit of anxiety, I might have anxiety throughout the entire day. When I learned that I could self-regulate within 90 seconds, I was like, are you kidding me? The amount of energy I have wasted, like just giving all my energy to like an email or to a person or something else that just honestly controlled my entire day, took my power away. And so when my coach taught me how to self-regulate, I was like, are you kidding? It's that. I mean, listen, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen.
It never does.
It never does. And I was like, well, that's exciting. So even this morning, a sensation came up and I sat there, I closed my eyes and I, put my hand on my chest and I did probably 10 deep breaths and it was gone. And I was like, great. And I moved on and went about my day and it's been a fabulous day. So I think those major two things is really separating myself, from my thoughts and being able to self-regulate my nervous system so quickly has probably been the biggest two game changers for me.
I get that one. I get that one a lot because mine wasn't quite the same thing, but it was very similar. Yours was the self-regulation piece as you described it. Mine was more like the self-regulation of what my response emotionally was going to be to something. Because I believe for the longest time that every single event had a default emotion that goes with it, and you can't do anything about that. That's just what it is. And when I finally learned at about age 56, 55, something like that, that actually wasn't true, it was like, where the hell have I been for the last 55 years?
That's exactly how I feel. I thought, how am I learning all of this? And, in like my 30s and 40s, like I thought if we can even start teaching this, my nieces and nephews, my poor nieces and nephews, right? I'm always asking them now about their emotions and their feelings and all the things, but these are things that we weren't asked as children, right? And we didn't learn to deal with. So I have fingers are crossed for, the upcoming generations.
That's another interesting topic. Let's talk about that one for a few minutes because I've been getting a lot of input from guests on the show and also from my own interaction with the younger people coming up, both the Gen Z and I forget what the next label is, but those two generations as they're coming of age and entering early adult life and so forth. There is a lot of reporting about how they're looking at things very differently from my generation, the boomers, the X's, the millennials. I mean, their shift is a big shift. It's a major change. And I'm curious to know if you've had much chance to work with them. I'm not sure how many of them fall into the high achiever category, but I figured I'd throw it out there just in case.
I wish. That's on my definitely my dream wish for clients. Right now, currently, I would say my youngest, let's see, millennials. How young are millennials? I'm a millennial, but I don't know how young it goes back. But
Depends on how you measure it. I mean, you're probably not off by
yeah,
saying age 30 to 45, something like that.
yeah, I would say so. I'm not working with, I mean, I have definitely worked with 30-year-olds. But I would love to continue, work with even younger generations, and because I've heard the same things, but I haven't personally been able to experience how their minds are working. I do have nieces and nephews, that are in high school, and it's really interesting to see, how they're operating like differently than us when we were in high school. But and they are like, when I was in high school, it was a lot of like, okay, I have to do this and I should do this. And I do see them really following their own paths, which I think is cool. And so hopefully, my nieces and nephews, continue that and really just lean into what fulfills them and follow those paths. But have you guys worked directly with any of the younger generation?
Somewhat. Well, Anne Marie's raising a couple of them, but so she has that particular. I mean, what's the parent side of that one? Maybe you can address that one.
Yeah, I mean, I just think they're just made out of a new mold. They really are. They're just so strong, and like you say, I think it helps having parents who've experienced a lot of the changes that are going on in the world. So for certainly me, I'm just like, yeah, education is important. Just do your best. However, just survive it, because when you leave school, then you can go and do whatever you want to do. And it's just given a different perspective, and they are more open to, well, I'm not going to sit behind a desk and get stressed. That's not what I want in my life. They just seem to know what they do and don't want, and they're very strong-minded. I think it's epic. I love it.
Yeah, the priorities also seem to have shifted substantially. I mean, I don't know that corporate America or corporate world have really locked onto this yet, but they're going to find it's harder and harder to find their top execs. Just because there are fewer and fewer who are willing to do that, who are willing to go down that road, because they say, well, I saw what happened with my parents. I ain't doing that. And that's kind of typical of the reaction from the Gen Zs and Gen Alpha or whatever they're called. But
and there's so many different ways to create a living now, right? Like with technology. I mean, you see these TikTokers. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like I didn't have TikTok growing up, so that wasn't necessarily an option. But now there's so much opportunity, different ways, to make money, not just sitting at a corporate desk. So yeah, definitely the next 20 years will be very interesting.
Oh, no doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt about it. I was just reading an article about this, actually. There was an article about how Gen Zs were literally leaving the corporate field and going out and making their first 100,000 in their first year, which basically blew the expectations out of the water, because historically, well, that's not the way it works, except it does, apparently.
And that's what I was going to say. Well, in the fact that there's options out there, whereas we kind of listened to our mum and dad, family, close friends or whatever, and it was like, work your 9 to 5, get your retirement, do everything in stages, own your house, just all these things that you had to do, and that was your tick list. Whereas now it's just like, there's so much information out there, so many different perspectives, that they can actually just research and find what they want so much easier.
Yeah, can you imagine if we had the same tools they have currently? Can you imagine how our experience would have changed dramatically?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to it, in the fact that I think there's a lot of falsehood out there, and there can be a lot of pressure on it. But I do think if you can accept it in the right way, then boy, is it amazing.
It is. And I think it scares the crap out of our generations, to be honest.
Oh, sure.
I know for my generation, I'm in the boomers, and they don't even want to have to deal with any of this stuff. It's just like, go away, I'm done.
That's funny.
I mean, Amory, you're in the Xers. I mean, the Xers are a little bit more advanced than that, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, I kind of disconnected from things like social media. I do go onto YouTube and I listen to a lot of like podcasts and things on there, and things I'm interested in. And like I said, I can go in and research. But I've just tried to numb the noise of the social media world, because it was interfering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the filtering you have to learn how to do. What are you going to filter, and how are you going to filter it so that you're not overwhelmed by it, but you can put it to use? And that's what the Zs are really good at. The Gen
Yeah.
Zs are very good at that. Well, I guess they kind of had to. They didn't have a lot of choice.
Yeah, I love technology, but I also love reading, right? I love walking and being in nature. So for me, it's just about being on social media to post like myself or stuff, but the doom scrolling, the hours of it, not anymore. And I definitely used to, but again, it's just like this energy suck for me. And I was done with it. I was over it. And so it was really just about getting back to the roots. And I think that's kind of what I love about growing up. When I, grew up, it was like kind of like that. So like technology was kind of there, but like, but not fully. But we were still riding bikes, like, down the neighborhoods. And, I saw this video the other day where they said, how do you know when to come home? And it's like the light was on, in the house. And I loved that, and I would never want those memories taken away. So I'm very thankful that for the time, although it would be very cool, to be maybe 20 and a TikTok influencer and making, millions of dollars. That would be something different. But yeah, I'm very grateful for that. For the time that I.
Well, that's actually another trend that I'm hearing a lot about. Gen Zs and the alphas rejecting being involved with social media so much, choosing, my God, going offline, doing actual authentic real world stuff with people. I mean, they're choosing that rather than being pushed into it, which I find to be fascinating.
Yeah,
I wonder what back.
I wonder what percent though, because I feel like there's just so. I mean, there's how many on TikTokers or Insta? I think that's where they all are now, right? On TikTok.
I'm not on TikTok. I'm the last person to ask. I have no idea.
But I would be curious to know those numbers of the people that are completely checking out, and the ones that are on it. I don't know how those numbers, but it would be interesting to see.
I guess that's why whenever I do hear one of the younger people talking about how they do that, it just catches my attention, because I think the expectation is they're all online, they're all on the social media. So when you find some that aren't, you say, "Oh, wait a minute, what happened to my assumption?"
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really fun conversation. We did what we normally do. We went down a rabbit hole or two, and that always makes it really interesting. But just returning to our original topic, you coming onto the show and talking about what you've been doing, it occurs to me we should really let listeners know, particularly those who might want to reach out to you, how to reach you. It kind of helps, I've found, if they actually know how to find you. So let's focus on that for a moment.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Constance Curtis, or my website is learn-here.com. And on my website, I have some really inexpensive courses. If you're wanting to get down to, what your authentic roots or what your core values are and those deeper desires, highly encourage you to check that out.
Beautiful. And I presume that you actually like it when people reach out to you personally and try to talk to you.
Yes. Please send me a message on Instagram. I would love to, hear if this episode resonated with you.
Because we kind of forget that. I mean, especially if we're in business mode, we say, okay, I got to do all the business things, but it can almost come off like, well, we really don't want you to reach out to us. We just want you to take the course, and which is not at all what you had in mind. One of my core authentic values is connections. Like that's the word. Like connections to me is very like high on my value. So please reach out and send me a message and say hi. I'd love that. Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. We have a couple other things we'd like to do before we finish the show. One, I want to go to Anne-Marie because, first of all, Anne-Marie is a former listener who became a co-host. So she has both perspectives, which is very, very cool. And in the process of having those two perspectives, she has a really unique way of tying everything together. So Anne-Marie, I know you've been thinking about this. How are you tying together what we talked about today?
I think Constance came up with something that we hear quite often, in the fact that it's asking yourself questions and getting to know yourself. What do I like, what thrives me? But I also, what I liked about it was like, well, what am I scared of and what's stopping me? And I enjoyed those questions, because I think that's really good, is to understand, okay, I'm powered by this, but I'm defeated by this, and getting that full understanding. But the powerful bit for me was when you mentioned about your body sensations, and that it can be the same, but it's all around your mindset around it. Is it scared, or is it excited? What is that? And it's just the power of your thoughts. And I just thought that's spot on.
Yeah. Love that. Absolutely.
Really good. I love it. Final thing I like to do. This actually ties into what we were talking about a moment ago. We were talking about the technology, right? And, younger generation tying into it and so forth. I noticed something. Now, I've been an IT guy for long before the internet came along. So it wasn't a huge transition for me like most of my generation. I had a different experience. But as a result of my experience, I also noticed a lot of things that happened as we were transitioning from one new technology to the next. And that was as we go online, and as we've come online, and we're now at the point where we can have these wonderful conversations via Zoom or StreamYard or whatever. And I mean, we're in different parts of the world. Anne-Marie's in the UK, you're in Texas, I'm in Connecticut. I mean, we treat it like it's nothing. It's a no big deal. 30 years ago, this was impossible. Yeah. I mean, now it's like every day, okay, no big deal, no problem. In the process of all this happening, a few things have fallen through the cracks. And one of the things that have fallen through the cracks, in my opinion, is that we just don't even realize and recognize how important it is that the information we're all sharing is impacting other people for the better. In fact, we don't get credit for it. I mean, you're doing this podcast. I'm sure you do other podcasts. I'm sure you have other ways of getting your message out about what you're doing and so forth. You're sharing all these insights and beliefs and understandings with people that you've never met. You have no idea what they're doing with them, and they're benefiting from it, and you don't get the credit for it. And I said, wait a minute. No. So, Constance, on behalf of those people that you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you didn't even know about, just because of all the messages that you're putting out to help people, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
That's so sweet. I appreciate that. Thank you so much to both of you.
And thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. And best of luck with what you're doing, because you're doing some good stuff.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.